as outlined in the final stage of the plan, which I've been adhering to for the past 4 weeks. Softly squeezing the trigger causes the Glock Model 20's grip to recoil slightly before springing forward, with the internal hammer striking the .45 caliber cartridge within. This action ignites the compressed powder, propelling the bullet's projectile out of its casing, through the rifled barrel, and into motion. The end of a multi-step plan, and here it was. I wasn't happy or sad, just done. And then the damnedest thing happened. Like, weird mystical weird. Out of your body, no one will ever believe this kind of event. The ones you read about and scoff at them, and carry on reading your Yahoo News and gently smile at the stupidity of some people who genuinely believe all that intervention and life after death and angels bullshit. I know I certainly didn't believe a word of it, and yet I was in one of those situations. I still don't believe it. Not quite. I was suddenly in a bar. Not one I recognized. Old wood panels, big European-style solid wood carved bar, glasses hanging down from holders and racks over the bar. Lots of people, the murmur of conversations, a TV blaring somewhere, bodies moving, people swapping stories, the sun low and the sky out the big plate windows which somehow looked out to a busy city street and a glorious mountainous vista at the same time. It was like a dream, but more substantial than that. I don't know how your dreams are, but mine are often disjointed. A scene happens, some interaction happens, and then one thing from that scene carries across into a totally different scenario involving different people. Lots of fragments, with small bits that carry across. This wasn't like that. It had elements of a dream though. Not that I realized it at the time, but everyone was indistinct. More like the idea of a bar than an actual bar. Not a memory of a bar, but what your mind brings up when you think of a bar, at a busy time of day. I looked around, wondering why I was there, and then I heard, "Oliver, over here, love." And I looked around and there she was, sitting at a table, that dopey smile she always had. She gestured at me, waving me over. There was a pint of Blue Moon on the table. Well, I assume it was Blue Moon. It looked like it, and as it was my tipple of choice, it made sense. Of course that would be there. So I ambled over, avoiding the indistinct bodies in my way. I sat down, looked at Ruby Madison, and wondered how I could ever have been so lucky. The pride of a partner like her mixed with the pain of loss. Remembering this event, I struggled to remember how she looked. She was like every different look she ever had, all at once. That terrible perm she had when I first met her, 11 years ago. The short blonde phase, the longer brunette period, the colors throughout time. That thankfully hadn't lasted that long. She'd done it for a Halloween costume and hadn't realized the colors wouldn't wash out. Then she'd shrugged and smiled and said, "Wait it out. Won't the school be surprised?" But it was Ruby. There she was, large in life, and twice as cheerful as her mother used to say before she died. Sparkling lopsided smile, slightly crooked nose, wide mouth, eyes that glistened all the time, full of life and vigor and obviously intent on having a good time. Only that was the problem. Ruby had been dead over 3 months now, and she wasn't going to be having any kind of time, ever again. I'd identified her body, with the car accident wounds, head all smashed in and marks all over her naked torso. Several not from the accident. You don't get love bites from a car crash. I should rewind a bit, to explain how we got here. I've kind of dropped you into this a bit abruptly, and I need to give you some context. I am Oliver Madison. Well, I am right this second. Who knows who or what I'll be a split second from now? Nothing at all, most likely. So what's my story? Short version, somewhat strange boy meets girl. Girl likes boy. Boy doesn't quite know why, but his mama didn't raise no idiot. So he takes advantage. Cost the girl is hot and cool and smart, and he's never going to do any better. Boy and girl get married. Boy discovers he has a genetic issue and should not reproduce because it's likely any offspring will be stillborn, and boy and girl go through issues. They recover, things go back to normal, right up till girl is killed in a car accident, late at night, in a car with another man, completely naked. Both of them. Evidence of recent sex on both bodies. Not much to be confused about there. And so we come to here. To me, sitting in my car, driven slightly off the tarmac in Idaho in one of the largest forests in the US, just off a very infrequently used road, parked carefully behind some trees so unseen from the main road, with the recently purchased Glock pistol in my hand, pointed at my temple and the trigger pulled, or sitting at a bar with my deceased wife. Take your pick. I met Ruby 13 years ago. I should go into more detail so you get it properly. I'm a fairly non-social kind of fella. Not that I'm socially awkward. I can party it up with the best of them if I am put in that position. I prefer to sit and watch rather than be in the middle. When asked, I can't perform like anyone else, just not many people ask, which is fine by me. I first came across Ruby when I was asked to speak at our annual board meeting, just after I had joined the company. Why I was asked and not my boss, Henry Stratton? Well, I'll explain. I have a strange job. I am head of corporate strategy at my place of employment, Breckenridge Moldings and Castings. Why, I hear you ask, would a moldings and castings company have an office of corporate strategy? What kind of strategy would a parts manufacturer corporation really need? And that would be a good question. To answer it, I have to explain that Breckenridge M&C isn't just a parts maker. It used to be, back in the 1950s, but in the 70s, they started also building parts and processes for manufacturing parts for other companies. So, if Ford wants to build all the parts for their new mesh-based transmission, they come to us and we try a few things out in-house, then advise them on how they need to set up their factories, what machines they'll need, what the process is, and so on. We built up quite a clientele in terms of building out construction processes, and then came CAD/CAM and CNC lathes and programmable manufacturing machines, and we started patenting some of those processes. Now we have quite a large war chest of patents, and we are constantly building new processes. We'll even do it for free now, for some manufacturers, and then license them the patent instead. We do still make parts for specialized requirements, SpaceX, NASA, Space Force, tank manufacturers, and so on. So there's a second stream of income from those contracts too. All in all, Breckenridge is a very profitable business and does well. And that makes it a massive acquisition target. We also do sometimes gobble up other smaller engineering firms along the way, if it makes sense or we feel our dominance is being threatened. The Office of Corporate Strategy has a twofold purpose. The first is to protect against unfriendly acquisition threats, to see them coming and develop policy and plans to head them off at the pass, so to speak. And the second is to organize ways to swallow up other companies we feel will help us stay where we are. One hand is really just working out ways to stop what the other hand is actively doing to others. It requires knowledge of the current state of our corner of the world, some sneakiness, a healthy dose of paranoia, a little bit of ruthlessness, and a large dash of the ability to make plans with lots of steps, with contingency plans for each step, in case of failure. And if there is one thing I am good at, it's making plans, step by step. I was hired out of college when it was clear I had no real idea what to do with myself after I graduated. The only teacher I've ever connected with, Miss Kessington, who taught business statistics and economics and who had taken an interest in me, recommended me to them. She was old friends with my new boss, Henry Stratton. He was looking to retire in a few years and apparently needed a protege, and none of the people who reported to him currently was what he was looking for, but Miss Kessington thought I might be. One graduation, one interview, one test, and boom, I was to report to the Breckenridge Castings and Moldings headquarters in Albuquerque, New Mexico, forthwith. I spent several years learning the craft, and Henry Stratton took me under his wing, and I was clearly his heir apparent after a couple of years. No one else in the department cared, because for everyone else it was just a stepping stone. They all had their sights set elsewhere, but I was content, because it really spoke to my strengths. I took over from Henry when he did retire, about 7 years after I joined. I'd married Ruby by then and was sitting pretty, or as pretty as I was really ever going to get, anyway. Ruby was working the hotel where the yearly board meeting was held, downtown. They did it there just to make sure it wasn't around where everyone else at the company was, in case anything awkward had to be discussed. I was sent by Henry to make the point that I was next in line to his throne, to represent him and get the board used to who I was and who they'd be talking to once he was gone. She was basically working the room, being the hotel representative, and, well, she caught my eye, and I hers. We got talking while I was waiting to be summoned inside, and suddenly I had a dinner date in the hotel restaurant, and it just went from there. I honestly had no idea why a cute woman with so much going for her would even look twice at me. I'm very aware of who I am, and what I'm not. I am the epitome of nothing special, but she did, and as mentioned, Mama didn't raise no fool. I took full advantage, even knowing it wouldn't last and she'd get bored or someone better would catch her eye. I worked very hard to both be worthy of her, but also not invest too much of myself in her, because the inevitable personal explosion when she decided to venture to pastures new would be devastating to me. So I ran this tightrope of surface commitment without giving my heart. Although, to be really honest, I was just fooling myself. She took it home with her after the first time she stayed over, and I had very little say in the matter. I had some experience in that area, but not much. The fact that she had more experience was fine with me. She could lead me by the hand, so to speak. And she did. She most assuredly did. Both hands, sometimes. And it was blissful. She moved in 3 months later, and we were married 5 months after that. And it was great. Terrific even. I dared invest myself in her, and it was the most fulfilled I've ever felt. Right up till it wasn't. So here we are, sitting in the idea of a pub with my deceased wife, about to be deceased myself. I guess the mind really does play tricks on you at its end? Or maybe there is life after death, and this is my introduction into it. It wasn't so much my life flashing before my eyes as well, I didn't know what this was. But not seeing my life flash before my eyes was no real surprise. Apart from Ruby, there was very little worth repeating now. Nothing much I'd care to see, anyway. "Hey Ollie," she said, pushing the pint at me a bit across the small table she was sitting at. "No orange slice, just as you like it." I picked up the drink and sipped it. Tasted faithful enough. Might as well drink it. I mean, what else should I do? See, that's the problem with outside life limbo excursions that happen right before you die. Do you take them seriously? Ignore them? Go along for the ride but understand that everything that happens is a dying mind trying to make sense of itself right before extinction? What? What's the etiquette for being quite skeptical when meeting the ghost of your dead wife? She could see my expression. Yeah, not what you'd expect, right? Me neither. She took a large drink of her white wine. That was her usual. But this was a big glass, and she normally took small dainty ones. Lots of them, to be clear, but smaller glasses, because it made her look less of a lush. Apparently, she saw me glance and grinned. "I know, but we have some stuff to talk about, and I don't want to keep going to the bar." So far, I'd not said a word. She just read my expressions, like she did when we were alive. "So," I said, not quite sure where to start. "I mean, I noticed some things. That's what I do. Notice things. That's why I was employed where I was. I even had a t-shirt that said, 'I drink and I notice things,' even though I didn't drink that much. For a start, I was not as angry as I should have been, or upset, or, well, anything extreme, to be honest. I had been seething, and upset, and hurt, and depressed, brother. Yeah, the mother of all depressions. After all, I was sitting in a car about it in my life. That's depression for you. But here, I was somewhat interested. I wasn't foaming with rage at seeing her. I didn't want to throttle her, or grab her and shake her and scream, 'Why?' as I had while I was still alive. Was I still alive anyway? Was I already dead, in this limbo, or whatever it was? Yelling at a figment of my soon-to-be extinct imagination seemed even more sad than ending it all in the first place. I mean, what would be the point? "I feel like I should be angrier at seeing you," I ventured, after taking another large sip of the beer. "Yeah, definitely tasted right." She shrugged. "Yes, well, this place, it dampens emotions, I'm told. Makes it easier to have a conversation. Answer questions. Without all the emotion and anger. You still have the emotions, just not as sharp. Not so that it will stop you being able to process the answers. Frankly, I think this ability back in the world would be awesome, but..." She shrugged again. "Well, I wasn't about to not ask the obvious questions. Who told you? Where's this place? Some kind of afterlife?" She shrugged again. "I can't tell you who." Then seeing my expression, she added, "No, I don't mean I won't. I mean I can't. I don't know how I know. I just know. It's hard to explain. There's some knowledge I have and some, well, I don't. Where have you been? Is there afterlife after all?" I asked, curious. I mean, it was all a figment of my own last milliseconds, obviously. but I was interested to see what my own subconscious would throw at me. Would it come up with something I had not already thought of consciously? Like I said, I can't tell you. I have no memories before now. Well, some vague stuff. But as to explaining what happens post-death, can't help you. Not sure I'd want to if I did, she said, with a mischievous smile. She did that a lot. Lead you on, teasing you. Never a direct statement, just lots of hints and roundabout, watching you work things out for yourself. It drove me up the wall when we were married and alive. Now, I kind of missed it. She watched me, watching my reaction. I smiled. Typical. She laughed gently back. Wouldn't do you any good anyway, right? I mean, you are at the instant of death anyway. Not like you could take back the news. Interesting. She knew my circumstances. You know why I'm here? Well, sort of. I know your situation, yes? The knowledge is just there. And honestly, Ollie, I'm so sad. I know I don't show it as you'd expect. Mitigating emotions and all that. But trust me, I am. That my behavior could drive you to that. I am extremely distraught. You'll have to trust me on that. Why do you think I am here? I asked, taking another sip. Now that I can help with. You are here to learn and make a decision. Learn what? She simply said, why? I put the beer back down and looked around. All the indistinct forms were not paying attention to us. Still, even if they were, there was nothing I could do about it. Why do you think I want to know? I asked, knowing it was a stupid statement, but wanting to be at least a little contrary. Because I would. And because I know you. And because you are here in the first place. Obviously, this matters way more than you would like to admit, because I'm here to talk to you. And you've gone to some rather extreme lengths to get here. That wasn't my plan, I mentioned, tiredly. This had all the hallmarks of one of those conversations that go on all night, long after the wine is gone, where people are letting their drunk speak for them, getting wilder and wilder in their statements the later it gets. No, I'm sure it wasn't. But here we are, having this conversation. I snorted. Sure we are. Moment of death and weird hallucinations are hardly the place to really learn. Anything I learn from you I already know, because you are just my about-to-be mashed-up brain trying to make sense of its last milliseconds. She smiled at me, sadly. Yes, that sounds like something you'd say. So, I don't know. Ask me something you couldn't possibly know? I'll answer, and then you can. She suddenly fell silent, understanding what she just suggested. I wasn't going to be checking out anything she might tell me. She looked embarrassed and looked down, then eyes peeked up, head still looking down. Classic Lady D pose. Look, I can't make you believe this is real, she started, tilting her head. But you can ask and I can answer, and you can decide whether to believe me or not. And you may well hear things you never knew, or might even have dreamed were possible. I don't know. Whatever, I said, dismissively, shrugging at her. This really wasn't worth taking seriously. The last beer was nice though. We are here, Ollie, and you aren't going anywhere right now, so might as well make the most of it. I took another long sip. Just needed some silence. Okay then. Suppose I believe you, for argument's sake? That's the Ollie I know. Open-minded to a fault, she muttered quietly, sarcastically. I sighed. Look, I don't know what happens if I get up and go to the door, but... No, she said, hastily. Well, we have stuff to cover. What decision do I have to make? I asked, trying to get back on track. We'll get to that, she replied, waving a hand in the air. The very definition of hand-wavy. She knew that drove me up the wall, which is why I suspect she did it. She couldn't help pressing my buttons when she was alive. So why would it be any different when she was dead? The upside of her triggering me in our marriage was that she could also press other buttons, if you get my drift, and did, often. The down was worth the up, in my opinion. That's why what she did was so hard to deal with. First, there are some other, well, not exactly rules, just things to know. Oh yes? Yes. You can't lie here. Not lie exactly. Well, yes, lie. But also, you can't hide behind half-truths or lies of omission. When you know a truth, you are compelled to say it. I snorted again. What a bullshit rule. Rules like that would start World War III in like 20 minutes flat. As a society, we lie for a reason, and that's to keep civilization together. From, does my ass look big in this? Via, what did your mother say about my sister? To, did you assassinate our head of state? There are some things people don't want a truthful answer to, for want of what they would be forced to do if they did know. Also, screw that. No one compels me to say what I don't want to say. Her eyes twinkled. She knew me. She knew what my reaction to that would be. Go on then. Ask me something I'd normally lie to. Or no, better yet, let me. She put down her drink she was holding and leaned forward, looking me directly in the eye. Why did you never like hanging out with my mother? Hell, there were reasons and there were reasons. She's a tramp, I said, instead of what I opened my mouth to say. Normally when asked that question, I'd make comments about her cat and allergies, or the lumpy guest room bed, or me having to work, or her making some food I disliked. Anything but the truth. There are things you just don't admit to your wife, and being hot for her mother was one of them. Turns out Ruby knew all along why I didn't want to go. She smirked at me, like she'd won. A tramp? She asked, smugly. Yes, the stuff she wears, the way she talks. She gets me hard, and I hate it. That I'm attracted to your mother. What kind of pervert is that? Hell, she was right. I was blabbing like a fat kid caught with his fingers in the Christmas cake. She laughed softly. Why do you think she did that, Ollie? She asked, pointedly. Once she realized the effect she had on you, she amped it up every time we were there, just to get a rise out of you, so to speak. Well, weren't all sorts of home truths coming out now? I guess that's the point, though. If this was my own imagination, it was a pretty good one. And I was not known for my imagination particularly. I did idly wonder if this was true. Was I able to divine truths from half-heard statements, body language, behaviors at the time that I didn't consciously understand, but my subconscious did? And now it was spouting it all back at me, right before I died? If so, it was all a bit late. I could have used that ability months ago. Maybe not be in the position I was in now, if I had. We sat looking at each other for a few moments, me being mortified and her being all superior. Well, I think I made my point. The same is true for me. Ask me something, Ollie. Anything. Go on. The obvious one was right there. Why? Why were you found naked, covered in hickeys in his car? When you were supposed to be in Chicago, why were you discovered naked in a car in Wisconsin with this guy? Who was he to you? She sighed. Straight to the point as always, Ollie. Well, can't put this off, I guess. She picked up her drink, took a long sip, put it down and sighed again. Well, fairly obviously, I was having an affair. I mean, that much is obvious. It hadn't been going on long. Only 6 weeks. 6 weeks. I erupted. If this, whatever it was, edited emotions, it wasn't doing that good of a job. Yes, just 6 weeks. It was on its way out. The thrill was dying and the guilt was starting to mount. I was having real trouble looking you in the eye. I should think so, I sputtered indignantly. Ollie, she said, hesitantly, reaching out and putting her hand on mine. I debated pulling mine away, but what was the point? She wasn't real, so trying to hurt her was pointless. I'm really sorry. For all of it. For hurting you. For you finding out that way. For doing it in the first place. For everything. Especially for you ending up here, this way. That just, well, it kills me. But I'm already dead. The attempt at levity went over my head. I was not in a jolly mood. She sighed again and pulled her hand back, putting her head on both hands, elbows on the table. I met him at a sales event. You know how it is. She pleaded with me with her eyes. Understand me. No, I said, coldly. I don't. No, you wouldn't, she muttered. You were always so certain of your path, weren't you? I gritted my teeth. So this is my fault now? I asked, holding the anger in. If this is what emotions were when dampened, God alone knows how I'd be if they weren't. And I'm sure he would know. No, of course not, she replied, pitifully. That wasn't my intent. I was just making a point that your life is different from mine. How we react to things. Our mental processes. You know how different we are. Were. That I did. She was right about that. And on the other hand, It's not like my knowing my path had led me anywhere great. I was sitting in a car with a recently fired gun in my hand pointed at my head. After all, that's where my path had led me. Suddenly, the anger just evaporated. What was the point? She wasn't real anyway. I'd made my peace with where I was, in terms of the end of the line. She saw the change in me, the sudden lack of intent, the slumping on the stool, the avoidance of her eyes. "Ollie, I am sorrier than it is possible to be, that this led you here. To this end. I need to know why." She was very much pleading now. Sobs were in her voice. I glanced up and saw her distraught. She could see the light go out in me, and she knew she was responsible for that. "Why would you do this? I am not worth it, Ollie. You have to know that. Why would you end your own existence because of something dumb and stupid and insane that I did?" I just sighed and looked at the floor. The movement from anger to just letting go was almost instant, and it was the reason I was in that car. I'd made my plan and followed it. Once I'd come to terms, well, not come to terms necessarily, more like succumb to the inevitable. I'd made my plan, like I do, like everyone who knows me does. I'd resigned. After putting together a list of people who could replace me, I documented everything that was going on, what needed to happen for all current negotiations to be completed successfully. Had to ensure that life went on for everyone else. I'd explained to the various friends, well, her friends really, I didn't have any close friends of my own, that her death had taken it all out of me, and I was going to move and start again. I needed to be away from places that reminded me of her. No one really knew the precise circumstances of her death, so everyone just nodded sympathetically, and I'm pretty sure sighed a heavy sigh of relief that they'd not have to deal with the widower that was socially inept. They'd feel obligated, but without Ruby, I was a social burden. I knew that, and I didn't hold that against anyone. I would have felt the same, I'm sure. I told a few people I was looking at Chicago, just to give them some closure. Then I'd spend a week cleaning out the house, selling everything, giving some things away, then asking the Salvation Army to come clean out all that was left. Then donated the house to a women's abused and homeless charity. There was no point in selling it. I'd have no need of the money. I'd rather someone got something out of it, that it was useful for a group who'd never have it otherwise. Then I'd given away our cars and bought a basic SUV. Something new enough to get me to where I needed to go, but nothing extravagant. There was no point in that. The Tesla had gone to a family in the neighborhood, and my BMW had gone to a friend who had sat with me after the police had called me about Ruby's accident. He deserved it. He had done it because his wife had told him to, and also because I genuinely think he was a decent human being. Not especially compassionate for me particularly. He didn't really know me, but in general. And as such, he wasn't going to leave me out in the cold. Then, with the only things I had left, 2 sets of clothes, and my phone, I'd driven across country to Idaho, to the Salmon Chalice National Forest. I'd stopped off in Arizona to purchase a gun, selected because private gun purchases had no waiting period. 1 Glock Model 20.45, with 1 magazine of 12 bullets. I'd need only one. Driving along the forest, I tried to find the least used roads, turned down one after another till I was on little more than a track. Then found a place where I could get the car off the road, hidden behind a tree, powered down my phone. Not that anyone would be looking for me, I had no one who would be, and then out came the gun. The rest you all know. The fact that Ruby would ask that question, when she thought she knew me so well, that she could predict me, well, it really just went to the root of the whole thing, that I'd been able to hide for so many years. The deep dark truth of the matter is, I was depressive, like a major depressive. I knew it deep inside. I knew why too. I was so utterly worthless as a human, and I knew it, right to the bone. The kind of knowledge that is just omnipresent and part of every decision, to the point where sometimes you make decisions just to spite that internal knowledge. Now, before you go judging and saying stupid shit like, "Oh, I'm sure that can't be true," and other meaningless expressions designed to sound like you care, and that someone just needs to jolly me along, to show me that I'm really worth something, let me make a few points. Firstly, while I'm socially inept and out of step with the world, I am not stupid. I came third in my year at college, not to anyone's surprise. I was the archetypal stay-home-and-study nerd. It was safer for me to just not interact that much. I mean, I did. I had a roommate and was in clubs and things like that, but the interactions were quiet and precise, and it was clear that most people didn't know how to take me or how to respond to things. I never made a lot of friends. Plenty of acquaintances, but no, let's get drunk and watch a stupid movie friends, if you know what I mean. The kind of friendships that get deeper with time, where you have a lot of shared experiences and things just make you think of that other person, like hearing a song or something. It just didn't happen for me. I don't think I particularly radiated go to hell, but I probably didn't radiate jolly fun guy either. And at that age, that's what other people are looking for, I guess. I probably didn't try that hard, looking back, but then no one else did either. So, what? But I wasn't surprised either. I knew I was different. I wasn't on the spectrum or anything. I was tested several times because even I didn't believe I wasn't, given how I behaved. But no, it was just ingrained mannerisms, rather than faulty wiring. It was a lifetime of falling into a belief that no one ever saw enough to try and derail. I was just there. Oliver. No one looked too deep, after all. Why would they? It's not like I blamed anyone. I wouldn't have looked either. Now, I'm not trying to make myself out as a manic depressive. They are different to what I was. I was, for want of a better way to describe myself, a functional depressive, where it was always there, always taunting me, always ready to ascribe a reason for someone's behavior that reinforced its own premise. That's one of the problems of the kind of depression I had. It was smart and self-justified in extremely believable ways. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, I'm not stupid. I'm even quite smart. And I'll say that myself. Being able to recognize intelligence has nothing to do with self-regard. I can recognize I'm smarter than the average while still understanding how worthless I am in total. Being able to hold to somewhat contradictory beliefs is a definition of intelligence. See, my depression is smart and able to self-justify. It can even use itself as a support for being smart, which then in turn bolsters its reason for existence. You can start to see the circular logic here. But being smart and understanding what is happening, and even why some of the time, does not stop it happening. You can understand why a tornado starts and how it works, but that doesn't stop you being swept to your death if you are caught in it. Depression, like extreme weather, is not something you can reason your way out of if you are caught in the center. Depression is the sea the boat of you is wallowing in. You can bail as much as you want. You are never going to bail your way to dry land. So I knew what I was, how I reacted to things inside, and I learned at an early age to suppress the shit out of that and cover it over. My parents had some idea of what was going on with me because of early statements I made, but they had no real idea of the extent of it because by puberty, I had learned to mask it all. And that's when it hit in earnest. When you start asking yourself why you exist at all, what value you are giving to the world, how you'll never really matter, and why should you? Most people don't. There was no compelling reason why the world or the people in it would consider you for a second. Let's face it, most people are extremely introverted in terms of what they care about most. It's all me, me, me. How does this affect me? What do I get out of it? The reality of existence in the 21st century is an incredibly narcissistic point of view, fueled by social media and reality TV, where people get handed amazing things for basically being either delusional and stupid enough not to understand it, or are willing to trade their dignity in the edit suite for some short-term notoriety that they chose to believe is respect. So many people these days mistake attention for value. In Western society, we are all programmed to believe that we are all special in some way. That's what the American dream is built on, at root. And as society has slowly removed obstacles from life, it's become a popularity contest that is inevitably rigged to the haves over the have-nots. But society functions best when everyone believes it's a level playing field when it patently is not. So everyone buys into it and imagines they are interesting, and that they deserve other people's attention and money, just because they are authentic or whatever word is currently being bandied around. The reality is that most, no, pretty much all are nothing special and never will be. We are the grist that society demands in order to be functional. You may think there is no difference between you and Bill Gates, that you deserve all the breaks and luck that he has had, but you aren't going to get it. You are just going to carry on working for McDonald's and making bad life choices and do things that are actively against your own self-interest because you are too stupid to really understand that you aren't ever going to be part of his class of society. That the huge random situation that put him where he is, that provided him with the opportunities that he admittedly took full advantage of, are never going to come your way. Now, all this seems pretty bleak and cynical, but that's how it is when you really get down to it. We now have a country full of entitlement, anger, narcissism, and plenty of opportunity to let that anger out in various violent ways because, hey, even serial killers are famous and get a book deal, right? People know who they are. They are someone. They are considered and talked about and make a dent in societal consciousness, if only for terrible reasons and for a split second in time. When most of us, let's face it, do not and have zero chance of ever doing so. This is just part of the mindset I have had for years, watching the world go by and not feeling especially part of it. I have more of an anthropological view of humanity than as an active member of it. The ultimate misanthrope. You might point out that I knew I was valued at work. I was able to negotiate and make plans, step by step, that covered every eventuality I could think of, and I was successful doing it, well, at least till the last issue. So, if I was valued at work and knew it, could I not use that to beat down the depression when it raised its ugly head? Surely that was proof positive that I was worth something? It's a good question, but depression, particularly in smart people, has an answer for everything. I was valued not for me, but for my ability to follow steps. The reality is that you could program a computer to do what I did, assuming you could create enough situational intelligence and experience. What I did was nothing really special. I wasn't clever or brilliant or anything unique. I just did my homework, and the resulting plan was a direct result of that. Anyone could do it if they tried, just most people didn't. Because of a lack of discipline, a fondness for incorrect gut instinct, pure incompetence, delusions of competence, Dunning-Kruger, take your pick. The point is, though, it wasn't me being valued. It was the work. It was the process. And like I said, anyone could do it. They just didn't choose to. That didn't mean I was special or clever or particular better than anyone else. Just that I wasn't carrying all the emotional baggage that most people were. It's not like people sought me out for social or personal reasons at work. I was sought out because I had a process down pat, nothing more and nothing less. That didn't mean the work and the process didn't have value. It was, after all, what I was paid to do. Just that I didn't especially. If it wasn't me doing the work, somebody else would. There was nothing essential about me for that equation to work. One wheel on a car is not any more special than the other wheels. Well, apart from a steering wheel, but I was never going to be that. Neither are you, more than likely. But for all of that, I am smart enough to recognize I have to function as part of the herd, because being a hermit doesn't appeal either. Rejecting society just means shitty plumbing and no nice meals that other people cook, and while I might be a misanthrope, I like to eat good food as much as the next man. The fact is that when I was young, I said and did things from actual genuine internal reaction to the world, and my parents got extremely worried by the questions I was asking and took me to places, and sometimes I had to stay overnight or for days on end being prodded and asked inane questions, and I soon learned to just shut up, rather than go through that. Protective measures were learned and ingrained, to avoid having excruciation encounters with well-meaning morons, who might actually end up have some degree of power over me. I always thought the funny thing about those experiences was that at no point were any solutions offered. There were attempts to figure out what might be wrong with me, but no one ever said, well, if it's this, then we do that to fix it. It was metaphorical prodding for the sake of it. My parents, good old mom and dad, I should mention them. They are gonna get some of the blame for this, not because I hate them or anything, just because, well, they are to blame for some of it, though not through any conscious choice on their part. They aren't malicious or nasty or anything at all. The only real thing they are guilty of is apathy. And at their age, I would well understand it. I have 6 siblings. No, we aren't Catholic. That's the first question people ask, closely followed by, are we Mormon? No, we weren't that either. I think mom and dad just liked sex and had some aversion to birth control, to be honest. Not something I want to dwell on, but they had 7 kids, so the conclusion is somewhat inescapable. I have 5 brothers, a sister, and then there's me. I'm the youngest. The age gap is 20 years between me and the eldest brother. All the rest of them are 14 years apart. And then there's me, 6 years younger than the nearest sibling to me, my sister. That's quite a gap, and let me tell you from practical experience, It does not foster a close sibling relationship. When my brothers and sister were out carousing and getting into trouble with their friends and each other, I was a persistent kid who, desperate to create some degree of familial connection, wanted to talk about TV shows all the time, none of which they'd seen or remotely cared about. I was annoying, to be tuned out and ignored so they could associate with their peers. When I was old enough to be at less annoying to them, they'd all moved out and moved on with their lives and weren't that interested in talking to someone they still thought of as a preteen who talked about crap they had no interest in. Again, hard to really blame them. It was more an act of generational difference than anything. I don't think my siblings hate me or anything like that. I just don't think I come to mind much at all. When we have family reunions, they have very little to say to me directly. Most of the conversation was with Ruby, to be honest. I don't have that much to say to them either, because I have no shared experiences with them to build on. Forever in their minds, I was an irritating 12-year-old they wanted to avoid, and as we got older, that impression never wavered. My mom clearly wanted a girl, and she evidently got one. So why the hell am I here? Because I'm the worst kind of oops baby. My mother was sterilized after my sister was born, and then I came along 6 years later because it clearly wasn't done right. A fact I should point out was gleefully imparted to me by my elder sister on my 16th birthday because she was pissed off with me over something trivial. What a great surprise for parents now in their mid-40s to have yet another child on the way. I'm sure they were overjoyed. By the time I came along, my parents were tired. Oh, I was loved, after a fashion, but the reality is that they'd already done 5 kids, and they weren't really in the mood for another one. Not with everything that came with it. And who can blame them? I wasn't planned, wasn't particularly wanted, was nothing special. I was just there. I was left to my own devices a lot. In some ways it was great. I didn't have curfews or wasn't told no a lot, but on the downside, I wasn't told much of anything. I existed. They did the bare minimum they had to, and we all just drifted along. I wasn't so much brought up as given a place to stay with some relatively nice people who were somewhat present. I got birthdays and Christmas, but not much interest, or physical affection or love. I wasn't given lectures on right or wrong, or had much interest displayed if I did something or was interested in something. There was no help with homework, and no chance of the birds and the bees conversation. And I know for a fact that's where it started. If I wasn't worthy of love from my parents, who were supposedly duty-bound to love me, why would I be worth it from anyone else? When the one set of people who were supposed to always love you just didn't, for whatever reason, then why the hell should I expect it from anyone else? They were there, they were involved when they had to be, but as mentioned, they were tired. 6 kids takes it out of you, and it's hard to really be too down on them for that. They just weren't willing and able at that point in life, their late 40s or early 50s, to take all the stresses and attention required that raising a kid really needs when they hit their formative years. Not after the personal cost in raising 5 already, and now another one. I don't hate them for that, or feel even that ambivalent about them. They did the best they could at the stage of life they were at. I was there at the wrong time, and I got shortchanged because of it.